Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Richards, and today I will be talking about a co-culture of mine, of which I am a huge fan, and have been for the last 25 years or so. It is called Puroresu. What is Puroresu? Puroresu is, in its most general description, Japanese professional wrestling. If you have seen or heard of WWE, the predominant professional wrestling organization in America, then you already have a basic picture of what Puroresu is. It is important for me to note here that Puroresu in Japan refers to all forms of wrestling all over the world. It just means pro wrestling. If you went to Japan and started asking about Puroresu, the person you are speaking with think you mean amateur wrestling, WWE, or one of the dozens or so companies in Japan. It doesn't mean any one specific thing. So the term puroresu is specifically used by American fans like myself when talking about the Japanese style of pro wrestling versus the other styles of pro wrestling. This photo here is a poster from Wrestle Kingdom 9 in 2015, which is a company called New Japan Pro Wrestling's version of WrestleMania. Now, there are a couple of major differences between puroresu and American style pro wrestling. The biggest difference is in presentation. American pro wrestling has a large focus on elements outside of the wrestling itself, melodramatic storylines, pyrotechnics, things of that nature. Puroresu, while absolutely being a staged and scripted event, presents itself as a real sport. Storylines are largely focused around either young competitors trying to move up in rank or older competitors trying to hang on to their ranking. There are also differences in how the matches themselves are presented. In Puroresu, there is a term called fighting spirit. Now, often during a match, the actual wrestling will stop, and the competitors will challenge each other to a test of fighting spirit. What this means is they will stand in the center of the wrestling ring and allow each other to take turns using their strongest strikes to prove who has the most fighting spirit on that day. It is something out of context that would make no sense to watch, but it is a part of the storytelling of most Puroresu matches. The photo here shows two New Japan wrestlers, Kota Ibushi and Tomohiro Ishii, engaging in a test of fighting spirit. Now, though there are differences, there is one interesting cultural similarity between Puroresu and American pro wrestling, and that is their portrayal of foreigners as the heels or the bad guys. In America, the foreign-born heels are usually portrayed as being from Germany, Japan, or the Middle East, while in Japan, the foreign-born heels, or gaijin as they are called, are usually portrayed as being from America. Now, this kind of shows, tying into our intercultural communications class, that both stereotyping and ethnocentrism seem to be worldwide cultural traits, at least within the bounds of pro wrestling. Now, pro wrestling has been around in Japan since before World War II, but it wasn't until the 1950s when a man named Riki Dozan entered the business that modern-day Puroresu began to take form. Two of Riki Dozan's students, Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba, went on to form rival pro wrestling factions, which became known as All Japan and New Japan Pro Wrestling. This photo here shows Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki before they broke away into rival factions. Inoki ended up becoming famous worldwide in 1976 when he fought Muhammad Ali in an exhibition match that was a precursor to modern mixed martial arts matches. From the 70s through the 1990s, All Japan and New Japan competed to be the most popular company in Japan. Famous wrestlers such as Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair would travel to Japan to wrestle Puroresu style because the pay of the era was so good compared to American wrestling promotions. Puroresu peaked in popularity in the 1990s with stars such as Kenta Kobashi, Mitsuharu Misawa, Jushin Thunder Liger, and Tiger Mask. An interesting note, if you have ever played any of the Tekken video game series, there's a character in that series called King, and he is based on the Tiger Mask character. Just an interesting little note. Now in America, Puroresu fans are definitely a co-culture. A very small percentage of pro wrestling fans in America are also Puroresu fans. It is a lot more difficult to watch the matches live because of the time difference. Most shows here in Washington State start at midnight or 1 in the morning. That being said, when I first discovered Puroresu as a teenager, the primary way to watch matches was through VHS or DVD tape trading, it was called. You would trade with other established fans. There was virtually no way to watch Puroresu live in America until 2015. So compared to the difficulty watching matches when I first became involved, I will gladly take staying up until midnight to watch a show. In 2017, New Japan began running special events in America a couple times a year, and in 2019, I was able to attend my first Puroresu event live in Tacoma. It was called the Super J Cup. If anyone's interested, the main event of that show, Will Ospreay versus Amazing Red, is available for free on YouTube. The photo here is of the Temple Theater before the event started. In this section of the presentation, I'm going to focus on teaching some of the many words and slang used by Puroresu fans when discussing it with other fans. I've already introduced some words. Puroresu itself is both a literal Japanese word for pro wrestling and American slang specifically for Japanese pro wrestling. Gaijin is a literal Japanese word meaning foreigner, but is also Puroresu slang for a white wrestler, usually not always, working in Japan. Kenny Omega, pictured here, is the most popular Gaijin of modern Puroresu. Heel is universal pro wrestling slang for villain or bad guy. Fighting spirit is Puroresu slang for seeing who can hit each other the hardest, basically. And while it's not, heel is not a Puroresu specific term, and neither is babyface or face, which means good guy. They are pro wrestling slang terms that are also used in the context of Puroresu. If you are with a group of Puroresu fans, you may hear the term strong style used. This means a particular form of wrestling that is used within the overall style of Puroresu. Strong style began largely to differentiate New Japan from All Japan during their years of competition with each other. Inoki from New Japan had a martial arts background, and he thought it would be a good idea to employ that style in wrestling as well. So strong style wrestling is almost entirely strikes, kicks, and submissions, not a lot of grappling holds. Many strong style wrestlers, such as Shinsuke Nakamura here in the red pants, they come from legitimate mixed martial arts backgrounds. Another slang term, King's Road. Like strong style, it's a term you'll hear a lot amongst Puroresu fans. King's Road was developed specifically by 4 All Japan wrestlers in the 1990s called the Four Pillars, which in itself is another slang term. The 4 pillars were Mitsuharu Misawa, Kenta Kobashi, Toshiaki Kawada, and Akira Taue, pictured here. Now, unlike strong style, King's Road style focused on dramatic in-ring moments and in-ring storytelling, similar in some ways to American pro wrestling. However, there was no storytelling outside of the matches itself. There were no gimmicks. Another slang term means over-the-top wrestling character. The wrestlers were portraying themselves. There were also very few submissions used in King's Road style. And more so than strong style, King's Road incorporated the use of fighting spirit. And because of this incorporation, the matches involving the 4 pillars, they became increasingly dangerous over the years, and there was many moves focused on the head and neck area. And Misawa ended up dying in the ring in 2009, and the remaining surviving of the 4 pillars have long-term physical injuries to this day. King's Road, as a result, is not often used in terms of a long-term style anymore, though it is still talked about frequently. It just goes to show that wrestling is scripted, but it can be very real at times. Now, Joshi, to me, is by far the most interesting of the terms I'm discussing in this presentation. Joshi is, in a way, a co-culture within a co-culture. Joshi is the term for women's wrestling within the Puroresu system. There are many interesting things about Joshi. First and foremost, Joshi is virtually entirely separated from men's Puroresu. The biggest Japanese company, New Japan, rarely runs women's wrestling matches at all, and only recently began to run them at all due to overwhelming pressure from the community to include women in their events. Because of this, all women's Joshi companies with passionate hardcore followings that have sprouted up over the years. All Japan Women's Wrestling, which is no relation to All Japan Pro Wrestling, was a company that for a period of time in the 1980s was actually the most popular wrestling company in Japan. They had a spot on primetime Japanese television. The Crush Gals, pictured here, Chigusa Nagayo and Lioness Asuka, they were crossover stars. They were big stars in Japan. Today, Stardom, Tokyo Joshi Pro, and Ice Ribbon are the most prominent Joshi companies currently operating, and there's a new company, Marigold, that will be debuting soon. Now, many Puroresu fans consider Joshi matches to be high quality or better quality than men's matches. In fact, a longtime wrestling journalist named Dave Meltzer has rated some of the All Japan women's matches from the 1980s amongst the best of all time. They far and away exceeded the men's matches of that era. So why then have the top companies in Japan largely refused to run women's matches on their wrestling cards? Now, I don't know all the ins and outs, of course, but I would imagine it has to do with men being the institutionalized dominant cultural identity involved with Puroresu since its establishment in the 1950s. Now, some fans argue that it is better for Joshi to have its own promotions rather than be intermixed with men's Puroresu, because women's wrestlers in America, for example, are not showcased as much as men at all. Now, this is a problem, but from my perspective, wrestling is entertainment, not true sport. There's no legitimate reason why Joshi shouldn't be intermixed with men's Puroresu. Joshi wrestlers would certainly be able to make more money and gain a wider audience from being able to wrestle on the cards of the biggest promotions in Japan. Uh, that they are by and large not able to, unfortunately. It's indicative of institutionalized power men in Puroresu have within wrestling culture today. And, looks like we're about running out of time here. So thank you so much for watching my presentation and have a wonderful rest of the day.